Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Let's quickly take you through what's going on. Of course, developments in the oil and gas sector today. President Muhammadu Buhari is scheduled to meet Niger Delta stakeholders in the nation's capital, Abuja, and topmost, hot on the plate, is the militancy issue in the region, which has led to a sharp decline in Nigeria's oil revenue. One of the 7 big wins launched by President Muhammadu Buhari last week was on the Niger Delta and security. According to reports, in the first 8 months of the year, supply disruptions significantly affected the country's oil exports, as 4 of the nation's 5 largest crude streams were totally suspended. But of course, we have the Focado's line coming back on stream. And then yesterday, at an oil and gas forum in the nation's capital, Abuja, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Dr. Ibe Kachukwu, hinted that a new regulator to license, monitor, among other things, the gas sector will soon be coming online. They will soon be creating that new regulator to license and monitor the gas sector. That is one of the first ways, of course, to decentralize powers around the NNPC and ensure quick wins in the very short to medium term. The federal government also is developing a draft national gas policy, which will be released to stakeholders first for consultation before it will be harmonized and released. Of course, it's very important. A lot of conversation has been going on in that regard, and of course, there are plans to end gas flaring by 2020. Now, staying with that particular issue, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Dr. Ibe Kachukwu, on Monday announced that the draft national gas policy was ready for operators' input. He actually made the announcement at the opening of a 3-day international gas conference in Abuja. And while delivering his address, he explains that the document contains new regulations and structures in partnership with the private sector. Let's listen.
This occasion presents me with a platform to articulate to key stakeholders our plans for the development and growth of the Nigerian gas sector. I'm sure you'll agree with me that there could be no better occasion than this event to announce to stakeholders that the government has developed a draft national gas policy, which will be released later today to stakeholders for consultation. I urge all of you to please give it the robust attention that it desires, because that will help us craft the final policies that we're going to release. The draft gas policy, you will see, promotes a competitive business environment for both current and new investors. It articulates our vision for the sector, and it sets policy goals, strategies, and implementation plan for our medium to long-term targets for gas market development. The vision for the sector for us is, put simply, to be an attractive gas-based industrial nation, giving primary attention to meeting local gas demand requirements, and then developing a significant presence in international markets. So you see the emphasis is tilting more towards the local application. The priority of the government is the utilization of natural gas for domestic needs, with the power sector as a key priority end user sector. However, it's also desired that demand from the industrial, commercial, and transportation industrial sectors will also be focused on. The attainment of these projects will not only broaden the economy, related industries will also grow out of these projects, such that jobs and other multiplier benefits will follow. This is the direction that we expect all of us to try and articulate and follow. It is going to be a private sector-led growth, and the private sector will be drawn from, most of the investment will be drawn from the private sector. The government will set the environment and support investors with appropriate interventions to bring their projects to fruition. Our policy challenge, therefore, is to develop a policy, develop institutional framework, the legal, regulatory, and fiscal framework that is attractive to the private sector. I must say that over the years, there's been a blatant neglect of this sector. We really have never focused sufficiently on the gas sector. All emphasis has been on oil production. Having regard to the effect of recession today, it's clear to us that if we develop a twin window of economic earnings, this country will be better off. So a lot of emphasis is going to move to gas. Under institutional reforms, let me point out that reforms capable of translating aspiration into results will commence with the strengthening of the policy making and surveillance capabilities of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. So the changes will start at home. We're going to be introducing new technical resources, restructuring existing departments, and assigning new mandates to the existing departments. These reforms are clearly articulated in proposed national gas policy, which we'll look at today. On the Petroleum Industry Reform Bill, we're in the process of completing a draft legislation. The draft Petroleum Reform Bill, which will address institutional and regulatory reforms necessary for the petroleum sector as a whole. We'll be passing this on to the Senate to include among the basket of proposals that they have. With respect to the gas sector, the draft bill will capture the key positions in the gas policy, including addressing the current gap in the Petroleum Act by providing clear rules for the exploration, development, and utilization of gas. It will also address other issues that are of critical importance to government and investors, such as the issue of gas flaring, gas pricing, wholesale gas market development, and the very basis for licensing of activities throughout the gas chain. The role of the government in the sector, this first aspect of our vision for the gas sector commences with the clarification of the role of government in this sector. One, government will remain the policy maker working through the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. Two, government will also regulate the industry, albeit through a new independent petroleum regulatory authority that will be established and empowered with sufficient capacity to regulate the petroleum industry. The new agency will cover the activities of existing petroleum regulatory authorities as well as new responsibilities. As such, it will be responsible for the economic, competition, technical, safety, regulation of the gas sector, and will have responsibility for licensing, investigative, monitoring, and dispute resolution powers. So it's going to be fairly powerful independent regulator. Government will remain a commercial operator also. However, the full legal separation of the upstream from the midstream and the legal separation of gas infrastructure ownership and operations from gas marketing, which is already commenced in NNPC, will ensure that NNPC and NGC are legally restrained from acting as barrier to the private sector growth and expansion. The market structure envisages a wholesale domestic market that is open to contest by as many suppliers as possible. Licensing regime. A simplified licensing regime will be introduced for every activity, including but not limited to constructing and operating gas processing plants, liquefaction plants, gas storage facilities, transportation pipelines, transportation network operation, distribution networks, wholesale gas supply, and retail trading of gas. There will be liberalized entry into the midstream. In order to move the market towards wholesale competition, producers will be encouraged to focus their investments and activities more on the upstream, whilst entry into the midstream will be liberalized and incentivized to allow private sector players to invest in the process, transport, and storage of natural gas. A new network code will be introduced to provide conditions for non-discriminatory access for third parties to all infrastructure along the supply chain. And on fiscal aspects, a new fiscal policy will be proposed for the Nigerian petroleum sector. This is embedded in a national petroleum fiscal policy document which is under development and should be finished hopefully over the next few weeks. The purpose of the fiscal framework is to make gas a standalone, separate from oil and not dependent on or consolidated against oil taxation. The pricing framework, our intention is to retain the current pricing framework for a limited period. The current pricing framework will end when sufficient gas supply volumes are built up to a level that will underpin a competitive gas market. Under such conditions, wholesale gas pricing will be market-led, except for monopoly infrastructure. In order to arrive at this point, however, the OB3 pipeline will need to be completed and filled with at least 80% of its capacity gas storage. Therefore, the industry will need to work collaboratively with government to deliver on this critical pipeline and on the necessary upstream and gas processing investments necessary to ensure fluidity within that pipeline. I just need to add also that different from just this pipeline, there's going to be a massive attention of gas infrastructure pipelines all over the country, and some of the incursions we've made to China, 80 billion fund is substantially focused on this. Infrastructure tariffs, regulated tariffs will however be introduced for monopoly infrastructure, including gas processing, gas storage, transportation and distribution, in a manner that will provide investors the opportunity to recover all the eligible costs, plus an adequate and reasonable return on investment. On security of gas supply, the current threats to the nation's security of gas supply from militants and insurgents in Niger Delta are critical, concerning, and thought-provoking, and government is trying to address this along with access to all our facilities through negotiations with various stakeholders in the Niger Delta. As you're aware, we're having our first meeting, which is already becoming very contentious, but it would have been surprising if it wasn't. But we're encouraged to continue despite these misunderstandings, to continue to engage. And I'm personally very committed to ensuring a very robust engagement with every stakeholder in the region.
Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Dr. Ibe Kachukwu, there talking about achieving a robust gas industry. He also mentioned that today the president will be having a very critical meeting with key stakeholders of the Niger Delta region to sort all of these issues. But meanwhile, the chairperson of the Nigerian Gas Club, Ms. Senna Anthony, has suggested that the federal government needs to establish a national gas council. She told Channels business news producer Temple Ashaju in the nation's capital as well.
What I believe we need and what I recommended was that we have a gas investment promotion council. You know, gas is a very complicated business, but on the other hand, from what you listened to when the Honorable Minister spoke and what GMD spoke, is that there are lots of business opportunities in gas. In fact, GMD's paper said that the business opportunities amount to about $52 billion. Now, if you are not a player in the gas sector and you want to come in to invest, where do you go? There's a lack of clarity as to who can guide you, who has a template of what you can use to invest. The gas sector itself is very large. You have gas gathering, you have transmission, you have distribution, you have gas to power projects, you have even simple things like CNG. You have governments like the Lagos State government that's been able to produce power from CNG. So if you have a group of people that have the template that have succeeded, you can then go to that group of people and say, please advise me. Where are the details of the opportunities available? Who can I partner? What can I invest in? And that's why I said that you need a group of commercially minded people that will set up in an office somewhere, and you can call them the Gas Investment Promotion Council. Because $52 billion is a lot of money, and you need private investors to bring in that kind of money. So there has to be clarity as to, first of all, who they go to. Because right now we're talking of clarity of fiscal regime, we're talking of clarity of regulator. All those issues have been addressed. There's now the practical implementation of who, as an investor, who do I go to that gives me requisite information.
Already the conversation has started, and so the industry players are looking for clarity. Who will they be talking to with regards to what's going on in the gas industry? The gas is a huge revenue earner, and there's a lot of opportunity there. According to information, about 42 billion naira worth of investment is just sitting waiting to be tapped. But then you need to have clarity, and so in the coming days you'll have more operators engaging with the federal government, and of course the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources says that this new document, that's the National Gas Policy, which is ready for operators' inputs, has new regulations and structures in partnership with the private sector. But then in the coming days, there'll of course be some issues that will be ambiguous, and having clarity on them with regards to fiscal regime and with regards gas flaring in the coming days is really very important and very, very key. But most of all, what is really very key at this time is a meeting that the president will be having with the Niger Delta stakeholders. Will have governors, ministers, and of course other political appointees from that region meeting with the presidency, as well as traditional rulers and representatives of militant groups. And just like Dr. Ibe Kachukwu said just a few minutes ago, it's already raising some contention. But by the end of today, we'll get to know what actually happened at the meeting. It's the first trading day of a new month. Rotimi Fakaijo, equities trader, gives us a look into how equities are shaping up in just a moment. Stay with us.